Dundonald Castle is situated on a hill overlooking the village of Dundonald, between Kilmarnock and Troon in South Ayrshire, Scotland. Dundonald Castle is a fortified tower house built for Robert II on his accession to the throne of Scotland in 1371, and it was used as a royal residence by Robert II and his son Robert III. The present castle stands on land where evidence suggests there was a hill fort. It is thought that a mixture of large timber-built roundhouse and straight-sided structures occupied the interior. A timber-laced stone rampart defined and defended the fort. The timber lacing caught fire and burnt with such intensity that the surrounding stonework melted, or vitrified. This firing happened about 1000 AD, and seems to mark the end of the hill fort's existence. Citation needed. It was about this date that the British Kingdom of Strathclyde ceased to exist, being absorbed into the Kingdom of Scotland. The place name Dundonald means Fort of Donald. It appears to be derived from the British asterisk Dundonald. The British personal name Dundonald is cognate to the Scottish Gaelic Domhnall and English Donald. The eponym of the fortress is unknown, although he may have been any of the numerous kings of Ald-Clut/Strathclyde, who bore the name Dundonald from the 8th century to the 10th century. There have been 3 medieval castles present on this site. The first was built by one of the stewards of the King of Scots, most probably Walter, the first steward, who came to Scotland in 1136. There is no surviving evidence of this castle above ground today. The second castle was built in the late 13th century by Alexander Stewart, 4th High Steward. This castle was predominantly built of stone. It would have been one of the grandest baronial residences of its time. It was largely destroyed by the Scottish during the Wars of Scottish Independence in the early 14th century. King Robert the Bruce's policy was to demolish most castles so they could not be used by enemies, including much greater castles than Dundonald, such as Edinburgh Castle and Roxburgh Castle. 1. There is little remaining of this castle, however there is a well and a rounded stump of a tower near to the present. The third castle was built by Robert Stewart, probably to mark his accession to the throne as Robert II in 1371. It was 3 stories high. The top floor above the lofty stone vault was the upper hall, the Great Hall. It was for the more private use of the king and family. The first floor was the lower of the 2 halls, the Lake Hall. It would have been used for more public activities like feasting and the holding of the Baron Court. The ground floor was a storage area. It was probably originally subdivided, providing cellars for different commodities like wine, ale, foodstuffs, and fuel. The tower house was extended in the late 14th century to add additional private chambers and a prison. The outer courtyard, called more properly the Barmkin, was completed, and ancillary buildings, stables, bakehouses, brewhouses, smithy, etc., built against the Barmkin wall. The third castle comprised almost everything you see above ground today, including the tower which dominates the hill. Dundonald Castle once had its own chapel, dedicated to St. Annan. By 1520, the castle was in the possession of the Wallaces of Craigie. In 1536, King James V granted the castle and its estates to Robert Boyd, but he was unable to gain possession and, after a second, failed attempt at eviction, Boyd ceded control to the Wallace family. A century later, debt forced the Wallaces to sell the castle in 1632, although by that time the family had moved its main residence to Auchen's house, which they had built in the 1580s, in part with materials removed from Dundonald. The buyer was James Matheson. He sold out to Sir William Cochrane in 1638, when Cochrane also bought Auchen's house. In 1669, Cochrane was created the first Earl of Dundonald for his support to the Royalist cause in the Wars of the Three Kingdoms. In 1726, the Cochranes sold their Dundonald estate but retained possession of the ruined castle. In 1953, the 13th Earl gave the castle to the state, which began a program of reconstruction.
The following extract alludes to an old Scottish folk tale about the construction and origins of Dundonald Castle. In Ayrshire there is an unknown rhyme that is probably very old. Donald Dyn built his house without a pin, alluding to Dundonald Castle, the ancient seat of King Robert II, and now the last remaining property in Ayrshire of the noble family, who take their title from it. According to tradition, it was built by a hero named Donald Dyn, or Dundonald, and constructed entirely of stone, without the use of wood. A supposition countenanced by the appearance of the building, which consists of 3 distinct stories, arched over with strong stonework, the roof of one forming the floor of another. Donald, the builder, was originally a poor man, but had the faculty of dreaming lucking dreams. Upon one occasion, he dreamed, thrice in one night, that if he were to go to London Bridge, he would become a wealthy man. He went accordingly, saw a man looking over the parapet of the bridge, whom he accosted courteously, and, after a little conversation, entrusted with the secret of the occasion of his coming to London Bridge. The stranger told him that he had made a very foolish errand, for he, himself had once had a similar vision, which directed him to go to a certain spot in Ayrshire, in Scotland, where he would find a vast treasure, and, for his part, he had never once thought of obeying the injunction. From his description of the spot, the sly Scotsman at once perceived that the treasure in question must be concealed in no other place than his own humble kale yard, cabbage patch, at home, to which he immediately repaired, in full expectation of finding it. Nor was he disappointed, for, after destroying many good and promising cabbages, and completely cracking credit with his wife, who esteemed him mad, he found a large pot full of gold coin, with the proceeds of which he built a stout castle for himself, and became the founder of a flourishing family.
Right, we'll see you later. Thank you, bye. See you next week, Jim. Bye.